Hello, my name is John Hong, and I'm a professor at Seoul National University. And it's been an incredible experience actually learning about Seoul through the eyes of other students, but also through the eyes of the city government. I had the privilege of being one of the curators of the 2017 Seoul Biennale. And through the lens of the Seoul Biennale, I began to understand really the way in which Seoul is such a dynamic and such an interesting and such a diverse city. This exhibition hall is very unique. I don't know if any city has a space like this. First of all, it's across from City Hall, which is an incredible statement actually. It's a political statement and a cultural statement. The other thing is the design of this exhibition hall is very unique. I'm not sure if you hear the noise behind me, but this is not a bad thing actually. You hear this street noise always behind you in this. And why is that important that we hear the street? Because this gallery is part of the street. You can walk immediately down a couple flights of stairs and arrive in a space that's accessible to everyone. Just to give you a brief overview, what we did with the exhibition was title it City as Verb. So instead of city as noun, usually we think of the city as fixed things. We think of them as houses, we think of them as roads, we think of them as infrastructure or buildings. And if we do that, the problem is that we think of the city as fixed. We think of them in a way where citizens can't actually enact change or be more involved. So if we think of the city as a verb, we think of it as an action. What we wanted to do was not only select cities like Paris and Tokyo, where many people have been, but also to select cities like Nairobi, where many people might not have gone as well. So it's a kind of a mixture between familiar cities and unfamiliar cities. This age of Corona, we want people to feel like they're traveling. Since people can't travel, we want them to be able to sort of see and look around the world at the conditions around them. We designed this gallery as a city within the city. So it's almost like you're walking through a small series of buildings and alleyways, that way experiencing an urban scenario while you're learning about these cities. First one is sustaining. For instance, when we think of environmental spaces and environmental cities, we use the word sustainability. And the problem with the word sustainability is that it's a fixed term, it's measured, and it's a kind of a term that's based on the building code. The buildings have to meet a certain criteria. If we change that noun to a verb, make it sustaining, we can actually imagine how citizens and ordinary people can take action. We have an incredible project from Tokyo, and it's curated by Fuminari Nusaku. And what it does is take small-scale interventions in the city of Tokyo and aggregates them into a larger sustainable strategy. The city of Amsterdam did a very interesting movie and the city planning agency actually put this together. It's called Building Circular Neighborhoods. And what it does is it looks at the waterfront in Amsterdam. These waterfront areas, for instance, they were open to large-scale development, but because of the economic hardship that the city of Amsterdam went through in the early 2000s, the city planning actually rethought of these waterfronts into smaller communities and more productive communities, and ones that reused energy and were actually self-sustaining. Gallery 2 we named Moving, and what's interesting about the term moving, instead of using the word street or bridge, which has a very heavy connotation, moving implies that we can take control of the way we move through the city. One interesting project was from Los Angeles, and was created by the Harvard Graduate School of Design City Form Lab. And what it does is look at Los Angeles in the very near future. As we all know, Los Angeles, like Seoul, has a lot of problems with congestion and traffic. So instead of everyone owning their own cars, and instead of having parking garages everywhere, which actually take up a lot of space, traffic is made much more easier through automation. That's tied to the way the train works, the subway works, even walking works. So anyone can take control and plan their own route. What this does is create a diversity of different choices. At MIT, the Civic Data Design Lab did an incredible analysis of Nairobi. And this goes back to the idea of diverse transportation. Nairobi has 3.5 million people moving through it every day. And it moves through using motorcycles, buses, walking, and it's completely, how do I say it? It's not coordinated. It's very difficult to move through the city. It also inspires us to be able to examine the way transportation is actually a very personal journey. It's actually a very personal way to move through the city. Gallery 3 we named Mixing, and the reason why we changed mixed use to mixing, the noun to the verb, is these days the idea of mixed use has been claimed by large-scale developers. If we think of the idea of mixing just as a plain verb, we can begin to think about how mixing in the city, how having diverse uses in the city can be a very positive thing. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, we have an incredible project by Felipe Correa and Devin Dobrowolski. And their project is called a graphic biography. And what's interesting about their position is that they're saying that you can't understand a city without its history. So they create a kind of organized way in which to understand the way the city developed and shifted from agricultural to industrial to basically mixed use. And we can see parallels with Seoul as well. In Vienna, Austria, we have a very interesting analysis by Studio Ville Stierowitz. And what they do is they look at the way industry can be part of the city. And their proposal, I think, is very significant for Seoul as well. What they're proposing is a UNESCO-style preservation of industry. So instead of industry being shipped off to China or shipped off to other places, which creates massive amounts of transportation and actually massive amounts of labor inequity, what they do is propose that the industry stay in the city. The reason why this kind of project is important and the reason why the concept of regenerating is important is that every city, including Seoul, has a kind of older section of the city, an original core of the city. And a lot of times that original core, we don't have very clear strategies of how to deal with it because the use changes. It's no longer historical use, it has to occupy a new use. Now we're moving on to Lima, Peru. And there's a great project by the team Sharif Kahat and Marta Morelli called Framing the Collective. What happened in Lima, Peru, and similarly in areas of Seoul actually, is that there's a big difference between the rich and the poor. What that does is create different kinds of segregated aspects of the city. So what this team was proposing was re-examining Lima and creating a better balance between these segregated areas. In Cape Town, South Africa, we have a research project called the Distributed Cooperative. It was conducted by Alfredo Brillenborg and Scott Lloyd. What it looks at is this region for the last 2 decades or more. It was actually collectively planned by the citizens. And they have this great drawing where they show citizens over the years drawing the city almost like a wish list, projecting how the city can be. And then, of course, implementing these changes. In Paris, France, there's a very amazing film called Co-Urbanism, 21 Collective Practices of the City. And it was curated by the Pavilion Arsenal. These were all collaborative results of working with the city, but also citizen groups. Instead of things being top-down, it was a combination of both bottom-up and top-down and meeting in the middle. Gallery 6 is focusing on Seoul, but most specifically the Project Seoul initiative, which was a series of competitions looking at public spaces in Seoul. And the verb we chose was layering. instead of tearing down these highways or completely changing road networks, what's very interesting about this project, these series of projects, is that public spaces was inserted above or alongside or below these infrastructures. For instance, underneath overpasses or next to highways along the waterfront, or even over water treatment areas, putting new community housing. And so I would encourage everyone to look at the way in which the infrastructure is not lost space. It's not space that's thrown away, but it becomes a new kind of public space.